Before history was written in ink, it was written in shadow. We speak of a time when the veil between the living and the dead was as thin as smoke, and a man could sail to the very edge of the world and whisper into the abyss. This is the story of Odysseus, the man of many turns, who did not fear to descend into the house of Hades to seek a future that the living could not see. It is a story that asks the oldest question of all: what is a life, if not a path toward the inevitable silence? This tale rises from the wine-dark waters of the ancient Greek world, a cosmos ruled by capricious gods who toyed with mortal lives like dice upon a table. But the gods were not the only masters of fate. There was the Underworld, the realm of Hades, a place of colorless twilight where the mighty and the meek were reduced to chattering shadows. It was a place of finality from which no mortal returns. Yet Odysseus, the sacker of cities, the strategist of Troy, sought to break that law. He had spent 10 years warring in Troy and 7 years drifting the hostile seas, cursed by the Cyclops and scorned by Poseidon. He was the last great hero standing, the man who wanted nothing more than to return to his rocky home of Ithaca. But the gods were silent, the winds were gone, and so Odysseus turned to the dead for answers. Our hero brought his black ship to the furthest western edge of the world, a place where the sun dies and the light grows old and gray. They beached their vessel on the shores of the Cimmerians, a land wrapped in perpetual mist and gloom. Here, Odysseus performed rites that turned the stomach of even his hardiest crew. He dug a trench, a square pit in the cold earth, and poured out offerings to the powerless dead: honeyed wine, sweet milk, and glittering barley. Then the grim sacrifice. He slit the throats of black rams, letting their dark blood spill into the earth, a siren song to the shades who thirsted for life. The air grew cold, the sea stood still, and then they came. First came the souls of the dead who were denied burial, flittering like shadows, gibbering in the twilight. Odysseus stood guard with his drawn sword, forcing them back, commanding them to wait their turn. He was a living man in a dead world, a torch of crimson vitality amidst the gray. Then, a tide of familiar faces washed over him. Heroes of Troy, women of old, all lapping at the black pit of blood to regain a moment of consciousness. He saw his mother, Anticlea, who had died of grief waiting for a son who would never return. She drank the blood, and recognition flooded her eyes. She asked of his journey, but Odysseus, weeping, turned away, unable to embrace the ghost who had once held him. He saw the great Agamemnon, the murdered king, his wounds still weeping, recounting his betrayal by his own wife. He saw Ajax, the mighty shield-bearer, still silent in his rage, refusing to speak to the man who had bested him for Achilles' armor. The past was a heavy burden here, but Odysseus had not sailed to the edge of the world for a family reunion or to soothe his guilt. He was here for the prophet. He held back the tide of spirits until the greatest mind of the ancient world approached, Tiresias, the blind seer of Thebes. The prophet drank the dark blood, and his voice boomed, echoing with the weight of truth. He told Odysseus of his perilous journey home, the cattle of the sun he must not touch, the crew he would lose, the final, lonely voyage on a makeshift raft. He spoke of the suitors plaguing his home, devouring his wealth, and courting his wife. But Tiresias also spoke of a peace beyond the war, a future where Odysseus would die a gentle death, surrounded by his people, the sea falling away from the old man. Odysseus had his answer. The prophecy was heavy, but it was clear. Yet the underworld had one more queen to show him. He had not yet made the offering to the ruler of the dead. So he turned to the ritual again, offering the blood of the ram to the Lord of the Depths. And she came, not alone, but accompanied by a thunderous throng, moving with a terrifying grace. Persephone, the dread queen, and beside her, the shade of Achilles. Achilles, the glory of the Greeks, the breaker of men, who had traded a long life for undying fame. Odysseus, perhaps humbled, perhaps seeking wisdom, spoke to the greatest warrior who ever lived. He tried to comfort the shade, saying, "Achilles, we hold you in high honor even in death." And the shade of Achilles gave a reply that has echoed through the millennia, shattering the very ideal of the warlike hero. "Do not speak soothingly to me of death, glorious Odysseus," the shade answered. "I would rather be a paid servant in a poor man's house and be above ground than king of kings among the dead." It was a moment of absolute clarity. In the gray, dust-choked air of Hades, the hero who had defined his life by glory and violence admitted the crushing weight of his choice. To be alive, even in the lowest station, was better than to be a king in the realm of nothingness. It was a revelation of the value of life, itself the breath, the pain, the sun, the very struggle Odysseus was enduring. Overwhelmed by the press of the dead, the screams of the Gorgons, and the fear of being turned to stone by Medusa's head, Odysseus fled. He ran back to his ship, his blood racing. The image of his dead mother burned into his mind. He pushed off from the shores of the Cimmerians, sailing back toward the living world, back toward the pain of existence, but also its possibility. To the ancient Greeks, this descent was more than a ghost story. It was a rite of passage. In the ancient world, the underworld was not a place of punishment in the Christian sense, but a place of absolute negation. Odysseus, the man of action, the man of the mind, had to confront the one force he could not outwit, death. By going there and returning, he proved that the human spirit, though mortal, is indomitable. He accepts his fate not with resignation, but with renewed determination. The journey to Hades represents the hero's acceptance of his own mortality, which paradoxically makes his life while living more vibrant. This story haunts us still. It echoes in the Divine Comedy of Dante, who placed Odysseus in the circles of hell for his flying too far. It lives in the modern trope of the hero who must come back from the dead to be truly born. The Greek word nikia, the rite of summoning the Diada, remains a symbol of facing our deepest fears to find the truth. Odysseus learned that night in a land of shadows that glory is cold comfort. We chase titles, victories, and names written in stone, but in the end, we are all just travelers seeking the warmth of the hearth. Like Achilles, we might prefer the struggle over the silence. Like Odysseus, we must endure the long road home simply for the chance to see the light of one more dawn.